it's only original content. So they're dropping like about $6 billion investing on it in original content, reportedly.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a caveat I attach to absolutely everything I say. I might be talking
Leaves to be.
Or Apple claims.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're back in the UK now, sadly, and without Guinness. I've only got a bottle of water. And we don't have Jamie or Ian, but thankfully we have a deep bench here at Telecoms.com.
Thick crust.
The thick crust, yeah. Why do you keep saying that? We've got Ray Chiretz Lemaitre.
Dreaming of pies.
Bench. He's a solid centre back that you can bring on for a good 45
Sweeper.
minutes. And then we got Wei not saying stupid things.
Hopefully.
Yet. So thanks a lot, guys, for stepping in. Wei, I asked you to step in like with about 5 minutes to spare, so I'm especially grateful.
No, thank you.
To you. So there we are. And before I get into what we're going to talk about, if you're watching it on the site or on YouTube or on Facebook, you can listen to it on SoundCloud or iTunes or countless other podcasting platforms. Okay.
Soon we'll have to stop calling it iTunes because they're gonna.
What's it going to be?
It's going to be Apple Music, and then, but in our case, it'll be Apple Podcast. Yeah.
Oh, is
iTunes is going away.
iTunes as a brand is disappearing.
I think so. Yeah.
Why didn't I know that? Why am I so bad at my
Is the
job?
company going to be called Apple?
No, the software will still be there, but probably
I see.
Not
It's
not
going
the
to
shop.
rename it. Yeah.
Okay,
The shop
the
is,
front
is
end.
different. Yeah.
Well, how appropriate that you bring that up here,
course I did
because
It was a segue.
yes, thanks for that. Because we've just had Apple launching a bunch of stuff, which is going to be the first thing that we chat about. Then we're going to talk about network sharing, and then, if we got time, and hopefully we will, we're going to talk a little bit about AT&T because has been a bit of changing at the top there. So straight into Apple. As Pierre so expertly segued, they've launched a bunch of stuff. So 3 new iPhones, which are basically reiterations or software or hardware tweaks on last year's version. So, 10 years ago, Apple just had one iPhone. They just call it iPhone. They even don't have the definite article, which really irritates me. They just call it iPhone like it's a person.
Then there's iPhone 3G, something like that.
That's right. And then we only had one iPhone for a bit, and then they went, all right then. We'll have iPhone and then we'll have a super duper iPhone or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they went 3 ways and went, we'll have a super duper iPhone and we'll have a cheaper one, which, I thought was interesting back from my days when I used to work with you, Wei, when I was sort of analysing this on a day-to-day basis. The whole point of Apple, people would speculate as to whether or not it was going to do a mass market iPhone. And, I always thought, well, no, because the whole point is that they're premium only. They're almost a unique brand in that way, but I suppose equivalent to something like Ferrari or whatever.
Yeah. Or Lamborghini.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. You see where I come from. So.
Yeah, I do. little in-joke there.
Yeah.
Which I won't explain because it might embarrass someone. And so what's the point? You don't get a Lamborghini sort of family hatchback, do you? Or if you do, it still costs you $100,000.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Audi owns Lamborghini, and they do make hatchbacks.
Well, I'm talking about the brand, mate. Are you helping? Because if you're not helping,
Just wanna know you.
first rule of Pod Club is shut up. What was I going to say? See, now you've blown me off track.
I think we're finished.
So they started doing a cheaper one, but it's still in terms of like the price tiering that we used to do, still up there in the premium tier. Anyway, they've continued that. So we got 3, but now the cheapest one is just called the iPhone, and it's iPhone 11 now. They've got rid of X. They've tried Roman numerals. They thought, nah.
I got a theory.
Okay.
No other analysts have talked about.
Right. That's why you get the big bucks.
Yeah, I don't want to get us banned in certain market, but I just feel that
we've got very little to lose.
If you translate 11 back into Roman numerals, what do you get?
XI.
That's the name of the Chinese president.
Oh, so they didn't want to have an iPhone
that's probably why they don't want to go down that route, so that they don't want to be seen as in the Chinese president's.
Imagine
very good
President Xi just going, "You taking a piss, Apple?"
No, I just when I was reading your article, I suddenly
That's a great
thought
shout.
about why
That is
not?
a great shout.
Yeah. well. You see, their Mac OS never goes beyond 10 because it's called Mac OS X.
They use Roman numerals as well.
It just never goes beyond 10. So
it was so stupid, the Roman thing anyway.
Yeah, I thought. You see, I hadn't given it as much thought as you, and I just thought
it's just a joke. But go ahead. Yeah.
No, I think you might be on something.
Yeah, maybe. You'll never know.
Only a truth is said in jest and all that.
Yeah.
So there we are. So we've got an iPhone 11, which comes in at about £700 now. Was it like that, something like that?
Yes.
I wrote it in dollars.
£729.
Oh right, so $650.
$6.99.
$6.99. Anyway, we get ripped off on the exchange rate massively.
A lot.
And that's actually cheaper than the cheapest new iPhone was last year.
Yeah, the XR.
Which is core to my analysis of the whole thing, which is that Apple's becoming more price competitive with every passing year. And then we've got the Max, which is more highly spec'd.
The
Pro. Sorry, yeah, thanks. I know we should just swap places. Except that I'd be putting the camera at the ceiling. Yeah. And we've got the Pro, which is more highly spec'd, and it's got 3 cameras, one of which is telephoto, another which is wide angle. And I saw a funny thing on the BBC. There's a certain phobia of small holes, and they've been complaining that they're triggered by this new 3-camera thing because it involves lots of small holes.
That started in the Mobile Congress when Nokia launched one phone with, not Nokia, but the Nokia brand phone.
HMD.
Yeah, which came with 5 cameras on the back.
And these whole
some people were triggered. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The first thing I thought of was that you could shave with it when I saw those 3
It does look like a Remington
shaver, yeah, exactly.
So good he bought the company sort of thing.
Yeah.
So these whole people aren't happy, but apart from them, apparently they're also triggered by crumpets.
What about people who have fear of taps? That's crazy.
Right. That'll be the next people that Apple alienates. But for now, it's just the whole people.
Crumpets.
Seriously, they're triggered by crumpets.
It's a circle?
That's a good name for a band. And now we bring on Triggered by Crumpets.
Triggered trumpets. Yeah.
Okay. I digress. So there's the new, and then there's the Pro Max, which is just bigger, and the Pro costs £1,000 and the Pro Max costs £1,100, I think. So we got that, and we got some other new devices. They had a new watch, which actually managed to stay on the whole time. It's taken the 5th iteration of the Apple Watch for them to have one that you don't have to press a button to look at the time. Now I would have thought that would be table stakes for a watch, that you just go like that, and lo and behold, you know what the time is. You don't have to activate it.
I thought they had one where you raise your wrist and it turns on.
Is it
that one is on
sensitive?
All the time, or you can choose to have it on all the time.
Well,
I don't see the point. If you're not looking at it, it doesn't need to be on. Save the battery life.
Because it consumes battery.
Well, I mean, as long as it's on when you look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe
then it's a fashion thing, because people might look at it. Yeah. They want to see a watch. They don't want to see a black rectangle. I mean, whatever.
There we go. Exactly. So they've managed that. Well done, Apple.
Are the watch numbers in Roman numerals?
No, just a 5. Just checking. Not a V.
Just checking.
Not a V.
Yeah. And they launched a new iPad, which isn't. It's just a bit better than the last iPad, but they're still very good devices. But the sort of the business story with Apple is twofold. One, and this isn't new, but their sort of pivot towards services.
Yeah.
So they haven't really been growing their devices install base that much. It's kind of plateaued, and their sales year on year, I think, have been down for a year or two. Not by much, but by a little bit.
Yeah,
so if they want,
it grew by 1% in Q2.
Right.
So the latest numbers, So basically, pretty stagnant.
Yeah, and Apple's used to pretty scary sort of bottom line growth. So they're now chasing services, which makes a lot of sense because Apple's unique in that it has. If you own an Apple product, as Pierre will know, you're kind of committed to their broader ecosystem, iTunes, App Store, all that sort of thing. So they kind of got a captive market. And a very big captive market, and a captive market with provably decent disposable income on the whole. Because if you can afford to drop £1,000 on a phone, presumably you haven't sold your house just to buy a phone. So that's their thinking, and their bigger announcements. And we discussed one of them a couple of weeks back with Ed Barton in this very room. Is this thing called Apple TV Plus, which is their own subscription video on demand SVOD service. So that is in the same space as Netflix, Hulu, the new Disney Plus, Amazon Prime stuff, and all that sort of thing.
HBO, I think, are doing well as well.
HBO Max, yeah.
Right, yeah. That's true. Good point. So maybe that's where I got a Max from. And the interesting thing about it, and it feeds into the other narrative that I wrote about with Apple, is it's come out pretty cheap. So it's only $5 a month. And not only is it only $5 a month, but if you buy something as cheap as a Apple TV box, which costs less than 200 quid, you get a year's worth of subscription, so 60 quid's worth of subscription for free.
Is it only with the Apple TV, or if you buy
No, it's a bunch of stuff, but that's when I was
Right.
researching it, that's the cheapest device that you could buy to get your stuff free. So you can't buy an Apple Watch, for example, and get it free.
So that's
But
$60 worth already.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So, which I think is a clever move on two fronts. Obviously, it's a way of getting an instant boost to the install base of Apple TV. And yes, you have to write a year's worth of subscriptions off, but you can't break into such a mature market with people like Netflix and that sort of thing without taking a bit of an upfront hit, without speculating to accumulate. And then the other thing is, it's quite a strong incentive to buy an Apple product if you attach any value to the TV Plus thing. So that comes to another point about TV Plus. I've been banging on, not really giving anyone else a chance. Sorry, but I just wrote about it.
I had noticed.
Yeah, I had noticed. Well, interrupt any time, mate. There's no standing on ceremony here. It's only original content, so they're dropping like about $6 billion investing on it in original content, reportedly.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a caveat I attach to absolutely everything I say. I might be talking
Leaves to be.
Or Apple claims.
Might be talking.
Yeah, it's a distinct possibility. Please factor that into everything I say.
Trust but verify.
Yeah.
But that's still, they've still got to take on Netflix, who've got tons of other content, and they've got all these great comedy specials. I can highly recommend both Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr, by the way, on Netflix. And then you've got Disney Plus, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
That's got all Marvel films and obviously Snow White and all that stuff going on in it. And Star Wars, yeah. And then the HBO one with Game of Thrones and The Wire and all that sort of thing, and Amazon. So they've got to drop quite a few quid. But it's only going to be their original stuff. They're not going to license Friends or whatever. So it's quite realistic of them to only charge $5. When even if they're spending a lot of money and they got Oprah and they got this thing with the guy out of Game of Thrones, Jason Momoa, and various stars, they're spending a lot of money on talent, I think. Yeah. I was talking to we have to people who don't know, we work alongside a couple of titles that are concerned with the sort of TV industry, and one of them, TBI, focuses on content. I was picking their brains on this stuff when I was writing it, and a hell of a lot of this $6 billion they're spending. I think they've got some new series which isn't even like a sci-fi high budget thing, but they're spending tons of money on even more than Game of Thrones, and apparently most of that budget's on talent, on the actors.
It will be
Reese
per episode.
Steve Carell,
Jennifer
Aniston.
It will be more expensive.
I didn't know they were that expensive
per episode than Game of Thrones.
Yeah. And because people like Jennifer Aniston are trousering all.
But then the story has to be absolutely perfect. Amazing.
But those names are a massive attraction. I mentioned this to the rest of my family, and they were like, "You have to get it."
Oh, really?
Not, oh, yes, I'm going to get it.
It's just no-brainer.
You have to get it, because if you get the family pack, then 6 people can access it.
It doesn't matter, because you get you spend a $5, you get a family subscription.
That's what he's just saying,
yeah, exactly what Ray said. So 6 people can share that one subscription.
6?
So which means it's
I'm sure the family is not $4.99 as well, is it?
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Is it really?
It is.
Wow.
So it's a lot cheaper than if you
that.
compare with the lowest tier of Netflix, which has been raised to what, 13? You said?
Yeah, $13. I think it's about £9.
Yeah, because in Europe it was also raised, so it was $9.99, and if you go for a family package, so-called family package on Netflix in Europe, at least, it used to be 11, so it will be raised again.
I don't know if I already pay a premium, but I mean, I know that I can, we can have various people watching different Netflix on different devices.
But not at the same time on HD, for example.
Is it? Maybe it's the HD
show.
Yeah, I think the basic one, you're allowed HD on 3 devices.
Okay.
No, you can have more devices, but you can't have 2 people streaming the same show at the same time.
Oh,
on
really?
HD, for example. Yeah, that you need a family package for that on Netflix. No, my point is, so it's a lot cheaper than what you get from Netflix. But at the same time, right before I came on, I checked their catalog.
Well, you had to, because they only knew you were coming on.
Yeah, they have. exactly. They have
At least he checked something.
They have 8 shows in total, plus
Apple's got 8 shows.
Yeah, plus the Oprah Winfrey book club. She's relaunching the book club.
Okay.
So that's 8 plus 1. And the 8 shows, including 3 children's shows.
Right.
One drama. That's the Jennifer Aniston show.
Right.
2 sci-fis and 1 documentary about an elephant. So that's it.
Is it called Nelly?
I don't remember that. No, so they have 8 shows and plus 1 book club. Netflix at the highest point, I think is 2015, 2014. They got 8,000 titles.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is the catalog is actually smaller now because they license some shows and the license runs out.
Yeah.
So so the total numbers fluctuates and also fluctuates from country to country. But there's over 100 countries where the Apple TV Plus will be available. They all have the same 8 shows.
So per shows, it's extremely expensive then.
Yeah.
So basically,
it doesn't mean that the $6 billion has all been spent on these 8 shows.
No.
I say the beers are on Jennifer.
For now, $5 a month is a lot for
for just 8 shows.
Yeah.
Imagine the scrolling; that'll be pretty quick.
I don't think it's going to make. Well, I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference because they might only have 8 things, and let's say Netflix has got 3,000 things. But how many of the 3,000 things on Netflix do people want to watch, and how many of those 8 things on Apple will people want to watch?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But the interesting thing is on Netflix, Friends is still among the top 3 or top 4 most often watched.
I'm sure Seinfeld is raking in the numbers.
Probably there as well.
Is it on Amazon? I think.
So
I've lost track. If I'm honest.
So I think
I just sort of scroll through various things that I'm paying for.
Well, and I think this is the key point. I think there's 2 things to consider here. One, as soon as I can't remember who it was, but another new entrant recently went at $6.99. So if Apple was even thinking about $6.99, they couldn't come in at the same price. They had to come lower. But when you consider, you were listing off the options just before, and that list of options of subscription-based access to video/TV movie content is getting longer and longer. And one of the things that the industry was warning against, 3-4 years ago was, oh my goodness, there's so many accounts now that people are trying to juggle. It needs to be aggregated and brought back, to just one so that people know what they're spending on and it's easy to access. And now this has just exploded again. If you want access to all of that, and a lot of people will, that age range, the whenever you start earning up to the age of 30, they're going to want access to all of those things. So that's like 6, 7 possibly different accounts they're trying to manage. Probably with the same password, security nightmare.
Right.
But also, you tot that up, per month, it's starting to get a lot of money. So what happens then? You go, actually, I'm spending all this money here, and I'm spending all the time I can watching those things. So I'm not going to renew that TV license if you're in the UK, or I'm not going to renew that cable license if you're in the US. So these new things that are coming out right now, the Apple, the HBO, the Disney, that is going to accelerate cord cutting. I have absolutely no doubt about it in the cable land. But also it's going to create a massive, I think, security problem and account management problem for individuals and families because, it's getting out of control.
Yeah, credential sharing has already been a big issue even for Netflix because you do see an account appearing here and there on different continents even.
Right.
So they're sharing between friends, maybe they know them on
and
Facebook
they know
and
this,
stuff
so
like that.
6 is a really interesting number.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're going to be tracking those stats, and who knows, somebody buys it for $4.99 and they say, right, who wants a piece of my action for 99 cents a month? And all of a sudden, that individual...
Can you imagine that? Collecting
Yeah.
How broke do you have to be? Like, yeah, I'm curious. You have my pound of the
Students,
month.
man.
No, I know. It's
Students.
It presumably costs
Students
you
could
more
make a
quid to
profit.
get
And
it.
then-
Very, very good candidate.
They would
Anyway.
spend £30 on
Yeah.
3
Do you know,
beers in an eye blink.
I had to change my Netflix password recently because I got an email going, we've noticed you've logged in Lithuania.
Yeah.
Was this you? I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
I was a wild weekend.
You know what I mean? One of those Lithuanian stag weekends. So
would,
yes,
yeah.
that's
But
all good.
I think there is still a big difference between Apple TV Plus and the other sort of true OTT services, in the sense that it's not available everywhere. So it's only on Apple products plus, I think, 1 or 2 Samsung smart TV
tellies,
models, and it will be available on probably more smart TVs in the future.
And the Fire Stick as well. I
Yeah,
think
and
they've got,
Fire Stick. But you won't be able to get it on, other platforms,
But
PCs or
Yeah.
your Android products. I mean, PCs are a big device for lots of the OTT services. And people do watch them on the PC.
Yeah.
And which means if you really want to have such a service, you better buy an Apple product. So I mean, it's on one hand it's the traditional Apple way, so
Very much so.
using it to sort of drive the sales of hardware. But on the other hand, if they're really serious to go into services, which is now more than 20% of their total income, and at the same time, the iPhone stopped being more than 50% of their sales for the first time in Q2. So there is a clear shift in balance.
Please, we
in the
got you on,
company.
mate.
No, because I wrote about it last quarter. So if they were really serious, I would probably open up to all the other platforms. But apparently they still want to use the service to drive the hardware sales. Is continuing their tested and successful strategy.
Well, so that's interesting. You've inadvertently given me a perfect segue into the other aspect of what I wrote about, which is, you're right, historically it has been use services to augment the ecosystem and make the hardware even more appealing. But I think they're probably, they're going to some degree of full pivot to turn that on its head. And that requires install base. And the reason for me saying that is that they've actually dropping the price of the iPhone. So this latest iPhone is actually $50 cheaper than the equivalent brand new iPhone was last year. And I think this is, if I'm not mistaken, the very first time there's ever been a year-on-year fall in the price of a brand new iPhone. So then you ask yourself, okay, why is it doing that? I mean, Apple's not short of a bob. It doesn't. It's not going to take on the Android ecosystem in terms of mass market.
No.
So why is it doing it? And I think that it's realised that what's absolutely central to its services strategy is install base, as you were just describing. There's 2 ways of increasing the install base. Obviously, the quickest and easiest way is to partner with loads of people. But Apple's got a seriously control freak tendency, hasn't it? It likes to, and there's some good reasons for it and not so good reasons. So it better just to have more people owning Apple devices. That's the ideal.
They'll also be testing out the elasticity of demand for these products as well, because by lowering it by $50, they could sell X% more and actually generate more revenues and profits and have a bigger installed base.
Well, you used that same word when the iPhone 10 was released, elasticity of demand. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's exactly what it is. It's like, hey, let's see where the line is.
Yeah,
going.
exactly. Well, we used to do this. This used to be a thing that we did when I was at Strategy Analytics. We'd often speculate as to whether they're going to go into the mass market and weigh up the pros and cons of it, because while it completely dominated the ultra high end, and thus, I mean, another report we used to do is profit, and it was like 95% of all profit and smartphone hardware went to Apple. Hardly any of the Android people make any profit at all. They're just sort of loss leaders for some reason, because they don't make much money out of services either. So Apple's completely cleaning up when it comes to profit in the smartphone world. But even Apple is now, and this is my headline, I said Apple finally gets a memo to sacrifice some margin in the name of accumulating market share. And I think the reason it would want to, after all this time, finally decide to make a greater push towards the mainstream is to have a greater captive market for its services, is my view.
Yeah, I think another thing. Sorry, Ray.
I was going to say, not necessarily sacrificing margin, because we don't know how much the cost of the components has gone down since the last iteration.
Possibly.
Anyway,
it's surprised if it went down by $50. But
I was going to say that Scott and I discussed right before the show that another big interesting part is they never mentioned Qualcomm.
Or even 5G.
Or 5G, Well, surprise. So, it's quite interesting. As I was reading some media coverage out of Asia this morning, the headline was the feedback from the Asian market, especially in China, has been very lukewarm after the announcement, because the other leading vendors in that market, be it international brands, Samsung or the local champions, Huawei and Xiaomi and the others, they've all got 5G products out there, if not already, which will be probably coming in the next months. And you won't get an iPhone 5G in another year. So the sentiment is, while you wrote a few days ago that finally we're seeing signs of a smartphone market picking up again.
I think
you need a catalyst to drive the sort of pick up, and probably the biggest catalyst in years is 5G. So the sentiment is that the other products are cheaper and they have probably even higher specs, and they have 5G, which means they are more future proof than the new iPhone. So the speculation is probably the new iPhone won't be selling too well in places like China and Korea.
I think they're saving the next, shape, because that one looks exactly like the same one before.
It's pretty much the same as last year.
They're waiting to refresh that for the 5G phone, I think.
Which everyone expects to be 2020.
And the 5G phones that are coming out now, when you're on 5G, how long can they last for? Like, they overheat.
Isn't it sweet? He's getting all defensive.
No, I'm just saying.
I know.
I hope it's shaped like a boomerang.
I was only messing with you, Peter.
I'm just saying it.
We have got bendy phones coming out, isn't it?
It's a little bit too soon.
Fair point.
They've always done that.
Fair point.
Also too soon for following their strategic plan, as Yamano from Ovum.
Who?
His name's gone. It'll come back to me.
Not Ed. Dario?
The Ovum analyst who's a specialist in devices.
Daniel Gleason.
Yes. Thank you.
You could have just said that.
Younger brain. Got it. No Googling needed.
Yeah.
But he mentioned back in February he wasn't expecting anything this year because they always wait until that.
No one was expecting it, and then there was the Qualcomm thing.
If Apple releases a 5G phone today, let's say, and then tomorrow people buy it, and then they test it out, and they go, oh, look, it died in 90 minutes using 5G. Oh, look, this one overheated. The press would go to town on them. So they let other companies do these mistakes.
No, that's always.
You're listening to a fanboy, so
poor Pierre. I discounted him as well. We're only winding up, mate. No, I think you have got. Even if we accept that you are somewhat sympathetic to Apple, you have got a good point. Their strategy has always been to not be first, but to be best, and all that sort of thing. Also, they were never going to launch it because they only just sorted out their Qualcomm business a few months ago, so they haven't had time to even get that in there. We know that Intel 5G modems are a non-starter, which is basically why they bailed. There's been, honestly, I've Googled it, and I think you Googled it, I can't find a single mention of Qualcomm in any coverage of this.
It's all integrated in there, in the whole processor. Yeah.
So I don't know whether or not there are Qualcomm modems back in the iPhones now, but there's just no talk of who's providing the modem at all. The chips all talk about the stuff they do in-house, which is the application processor and the GPU, which they call Bionic, A13 Bionic now, isn't it?
That's integrated. That includes the modem, I believe.
Yeah, but they don't make the chip. I mean, if they integrate someone else's, that's fine, but there's no talk of who that person that they integrated the modem of. Anyway, they will one day.
So if you think about the first iPhone when it came out, 3G was around, and then everyone said, well, this is amazing,
it wasn't
how come it's not 3G? And basically they couldn't make it, they couldn't power the new UI and a 3G modem, so they had to wait a bit and understand, the mistakes, and I don't know.
Yeah,
you cannot have it all.
So what do you think, before we move it on, having pilloried you as an Apple fanboy, let's give you an opportunity as, let's be kinder and say as an Apple enthusiast. What do you think of these new launches? Are you going to rush off and buy? You're still on the X, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm not going to buy any of those.
No. How long do you think you'll keep the X going for?
Even the one with the Razr.
Yeah. The 3 cameras he thinks looks like those electric razors.
No, definitely not. No. It's like I have my laptop.
It's been 2 years,
I bought
right?
my laptop in 2012. I'm still waiting for a new laptop that's significantly different to the one I have.
I see.
You know what I mean? If they work and there's nothing wrong with them.
No, fair enough.
I mean, I bought
They
this
made
one
them too
'cause
good.
that one came with 2 cameras. They had the portrait mode. You know, I had an iPhone 6 before that, so there was quite a bit of a difference.
You don't need
Yeah.
a slow-mo selfie now.
Oh, slow fees.
Slow-fee, is
No,
that a
they
thing?
actually
God.
called it that. Unbelievable.
My God.
That's the first time. Actually, it's the first time I
How do
say
you
it
do a
out
I
loud.
Well,
thought that
you
was
just
the name
sort
of
of
our marketing manager.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yes. No, I can't see
Not
that.
as good as the Belfi.
That just sounds rude.
You just look it up.
It probably is rude. Okay, well then maybe it's time to move on. Ray, let's get things back down to earth and talk
Oh.
about network sharing and that sort of
Seems
thing.
so dull now, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
Well, it's just a trend. I think it's worth pointing out and talking about that I mean, network sharing is not new, but I think it looks like we are entering a new phase of companies being forced into striking network sharing agreements, but also at the same time needing to offload some of the assets, the passive infrastructure assets in terms of the mobile towers that they have. So recently we've seen network sharing agreements in Italy where the operators got completely creamed and their wallets emptied
Okay.
for the 5G spectrum.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. They got a bit over exuberant in the auction, didn't they?
In China, as I think Wade written about and Ian on Light Reading written about, and Robert Clark, our man in Hong Kong. You know, the massive cost in China has led to China Telecom and China Unicom now going to be building one single sharing network, 5G network.
But China Mobile's not involved in any of that, is it?
No.
No.
So it's essentially going to be 2 infrastructures. Ian's introduction, I think, to that was great. In a country of 1.4 billion, it seems strange to only have 3 operators. Now you're only going to have 2 networks.
Yeah.
You know? But I think, you know, I see this trend is going to continue. Maybe not in the US because that's really not seen as something that they particularly want to do. But of course, you know, we're now coming to an era of fewer mobile operators in the US, but especially around Europe, I expect to see network sharing become much more of a thing. Definitely in passive, probably lead to active as well, which is where I think China's going. So the only differentiation is in the core.
Yeah.
So this is going another step further, and this is how much it's going to cost to get these networks out and also remain, profitable,
Right.
remain in business. Then the other element to this is Vodafone recently has talked about hiving off all of its towers into a company where it will look to sell a share to somebody else to try and get some money back. And Telefonica is now exploring the same kind of things. These companies are starting to really hurt their balance sheets. AT&T, and I know we're going to come to them in a minute, but just in terms of how much they're hurting and how much debt they're carrying, AT&T is carrying $170 billion worth of debt.
Yeah.
This is big time, and the ramifications of that we might come to if we've got time in a minute.
Sure.
There's a hell of a lot of debt sloshing around. There's obviously a lot of cash flow. So it's not like people aren't spending with these companies.
Yeah.
But they need to retain some kind of have some kind of long-term goal for profitability, and building their own 5G networks and the nightmare of going, and we're only in the kind of enhanced mobile broadband part of 5G as well.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine when it gets down to, oh my God, we need some edge computing. People's eyeballs are going to pop out of their heads.
Yeah.
Even if they're not building it themselves. Anyway,
Yep.
The costs are getting out of control, and I think they can see this now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we even start to see within the European Union, for example, if it lasts long enough, some cross-border network sharing, and not just within the large groups like Deutsche Telekom and Orange, but between tier 2s, tier 3s and tier 4s. I think we can wave goodbye to them in a couple of years.
So you seem to be implying that the cost of rolling out 5G is greater than it might have previously been thought. Is that correct?
I think there's always been there's always been some kind of, I guess, doom merchants saying you don't realize how much it's going to cost if you're going to have that cell densification, if you're going to have edge computing, if you're going to have the cloud platforms required for, real time, changes in the network. But it's slowly dawning, I think, on everybody that, skill shortage, new tech deployments, et cetera, and then the sheer volume. Even if you go the white box route, which AT&T is really trying to push and aiming for 75% on virtualized functions and being able to go down the white box route, that still costs a hell of a lot of money, and costs a lot of money to run. So this is all stacking up and staring them in the face, and I think the CFOs have finally had a meltdown.
So hence the continued trend towards asset disposal, basically.
Asset disposal, but you've got to make sure you don't get rid of the assets you might need in the future. And I think this is there have been some operators who in recent years who've been having a look at their debt piles and they go, well, look at that real estate, all that lovely real estate we have with our local exchanges. Let's sell some of those. And I'm not saying that it'll come back to haunt them, but if they sell too many central offices and then they go, right, now edge computing, shit.
we could have done with them.
What happened to all that land we own?
Exactly.
Because remember, telecom operators used to be described as real estate companies that provide communication services.
Right.
Well, one speculation, I don't believe it's entirely true, but one speculation on Amazon's purchase of Whole Foods was to get the was to get the footprints into the real estate that well distributed, that they could build future data centers for edge computing.
Wow.
I don't think it's that crazy, and I think
they'll still keep selling the health food, but then there'll be a great bunch of servers in the back.
I think there's going to be some really interesting M&A around this, especially around these edge assets and needing more localized real estate, that you'll find some companies buying outside of their sector in the way Amazon did into foods. You might find, for example, one of the web scale giants or a large telco saying, let's buy the company that has all the digital advertising on the streets because they have cash flow, they have a business. That's not going away, but at the same time, we have the physical assets, and then we can start to do stuff on those physical assets as well.
Interesting. So various worlds will collide.
I think so, yeah. Well, and the bankers will win.
Yeah, you need a cold room to store the food, so you could better off just put some data center there as well.
Right, next to the ham.
In-house cooling.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'll have a bit of storage and a brie and rocket roll.
Exactly. It's weird. Well, I mean, the whole Amazon thing, it's counterintuitive that they've gone from being e-tail giant to cloud computing giant. Yeah. But that's an example of how
a byproduct.
The underlying infrastructure that powered one thing obviously led to the other.
Yeah. But it all makes sense. I mean, the idea that everybody is going to build all of their own stuff every time is just a little bit crazy. Of course, there's plenty of examples about how if you go too far and try going down the single wholesale network route, that can come back and bite you in the bum as well. If you look at NBN in Australia, Singapore tried a similar thing, and I think I'm not sure how successful that's been. Certainly hasn't lived up to the expectations. This has been going nearly 10 years in Singapore. But, I mean, NBN has been a political football as well, and these things, so there needs to be that kind of that middle ground, and this is obviously the regulators then come into play there and need to allow this to happen or enable it to happen. And keep harking back to Spain as a great example of where regulation, and I think we talked about this, didn't we? Not on the pod, but elsewhere. Great regulation can lead to network sharing and investment sharing. In this case, it was fiber access infrastructure. And now Spain is way ahead of so many other markets in Europe in terms of its fiber access, at least availability.
Which you wouldn't necessarily have assumed about Spain.
No.
Yeah. That is
especially as they started that when Spain's economy was in the toilet.
Yeah.
And now it's coming back up and they have all this digital infrastructure.
And they're ready to
rock. Well placed, very much so.
Yeah. Perhaps I'll clear off there when the whole Brexit
Good idea.
thing goes horribly
I'm going to
wrong.
go and live in Valencia.
Yeah. Okay. we're running out of time. We promised to talk about AT&T, so let's. A couple of things that sprung to mind for me in terms of recent news about AT&T is the one that intrigued me is Elliott something or other, an activist
Elliott
investor management. Activist investor firm that we've written lots about in the context of Telecom Italia, because Vivendi tried to buy a quarter of Telecom Italia, but then basically run the whole thing. And they were getting away with it if it wasn't for those meddling Elliott management who stepped in and only bought about
Scooby?
great Shaggy impression, or Scooby for that matter. Elliott management stepped in and only bought much less, like 5 or 10%. But then they're obviously good at what they do, and there was a vote as to who gets to call the shots out of these sort of large minority investors, and Elliott ended up winning, much to Vivendi's irritation. So Elliott's very good at stepping in, buying a decent minority of a company, and then calling the shots. They're a classic activist investor firm. And now they've just bought a chunk of AT&T, which is surprising, because I know Telecom Italia is pretty big, but AT&T must be an order of magnitude much bigger. And, you know, I didn't write it up, Jamie did, so I'm trying to remember from when I edited it. But basically, they're doing the activist investor thing, going, well, we reckon some shit will be done better. And now that we get to pipe up at shareholder meeting, the other advantage an activist investor has is nearly all other investors are institutional, and so they're very passive. They're just pension funds or whatever. They don't bother piping up most of the time. So you can have people like him, and there was various other Carl Icahn. There were various sort of individual activist investors that are able to really punch above their weight, partly because no one else is really saying anything. So he's come in. And to me, it's just really interesting because they've proven with Telecom Italia that they can make a difference.
Yep. They don't always win, but Elliott has a really good track record of getting its way. But not only getting its way, but Elliott has a great track record of boosting the value of the shares in the medium and long term.
Right.
And so the other investors will go,
hello,
hey, we'll leave it up to them because that nice stake we had in AT&T, this is likely to go up. So I haven't actually looked to see what the impact on the share price of AT&T has been of Elliott coming in. But I'd be and there's lots of different things hit share prices, but I'd be amazed if it hasn't gone up, because their involvement usually means that something is going to happen to the benefit, because they own 3.2% now, and that's a bloody big stake.
That is.
They're going to do everything, obviously, to make that stake, better, and that makes everybody's
how much
stake
money is that?
That's they're not short of a bob or two, but they've got an excellent track record of just, and they are really aggressive.
And the people who don't tend to be so happy about active investors get involved are the senior management.
Absolutely, because all of their judgments are called, called to account. It's like, so you bought this company, why? And for that money, that's crazy.
Yeah. And then they come in and go, why did you make a decision? They're used to just being in the golf club.
I think
going,
for AT&T, I think it's the DirecTV acquisition. I think is the one that's been highlighted as a standout bummer.
When was this announced? The Elliott thing.
In the last 24
of days.
No, I think maybe
last 48 hours.
Monday it went up.
That would be it.
Maybe that was it. Yeah, Monday.
That would be it.
What was that? Was that much? Was it a little spike?
$1.50, which is not significant.
And then the other thing that's going on at the same time is AT&T just replaced the head of its comms bit. So the only bit as it used to be before it started buying tele companies. And there used to be a chap called Donovan, who I don't know much about, but maybe Ray does, being a bit more...
John Donovan,
before US-centric. And then we were replaced by a guy with an excellent surname, Macklefresh. So my headline was AT&T breathes some Macklefresh air into its comms division. But again, back to you, Ray. Sorry, Ray, no offence, mate. Back to you, Ray, because you know what you're talking about. No, only joking. Donovan,
of course I don't.
They set me up for a fall here. I don't know
do we care about Donovan leaving? Do we think changing? What are going to be the effects, if any, of this changing the guard?
Well,
just one lifer replaced with another lifer, by the way. If you don't know much about Macklefresh.
Yeah, but I mean, at Light Reading we say there's three really important things for this industry. One is tech, one is money, and one is people. And that people element is often underplayed. And, Donovan was a very highly respected individual, and he was a straight talker, and he wasn't a bullshitter. And, if he was talking about stuff, people would listen because people thought, he knows what he's talking about as well. And, he has been really the architect of where AT&T has gone in the past 3 or 4 years in terms of taking its networking strategy down the sort of, you call it the telco cloud route or virtualization route or whatever. And he really pressed that hard. And also in getting involved in things like ONAP, and to try and get that to industry standards so that everybody's playing at the same game as AT&T without it being a defined industry standard. So he was incredibly influential. So to step into his shoes is a pretty big deal. And so I think we can probably expect some announcements of, here's some new developments for AT&T, so that the new incumbent what was his name again?
Yeah, Mac. Yes, MCEL Fresh.
Right, Mackel Fresh.
It could be like a rapper.
And I'm going to stumble over.
I'm MCL Fresh, isn't it?
I'm going to stumble over that one in front of a large audience pretty damn soon, I reckon.
Call him MCL Fresh.
Yeah, but he's going to have to prove himself. Those are very big boots to step into, but of course you can't with a company like AT&T, and especially now there's going to be a hell of a lot more focus on costs and strategy and where all these things are going. That's a really tough job, and you can't just start one of these programs of change and then just let it run itself. Somebody needs to be there pushing all the parts of the business to make sure they're all moving in the right direction at the same pace, and everybody knows what everybody else is doing. That is an absolutely mammoth task, as well as trying to get the rest of the world to come on board and follow the same kind of trajectory so that you get the economies of scale and you can have global influence, et cetera, which, by the way, is why there's, people say, all this kind of, fighting about who's first about 5G is just a load of crap. Well, actually, the first movers tend to be much more influential. And if there's lots of different ways to cut the cloth on all of these strategies, and people will want everything to go the way they're going, so it'll work out better for their businesses in the end. So this stuff actually really does matter. So massive job for this guy. But the other person I would call out at AT&T is a guy called Chris Rice, because he's still there, and he's almost the, he's the person on the day-to-day pulling the strings and making sure these things are moving forward. The one step down from the big strategy head,
right. And
he plays an incredibly important role. So it's also it will be very important that those two individuals see eye to eye and get along together, because as we've seen in US politics just in the past couple of days, you can have two very important people. If they don't see eye to eye, then one usually ends up going.
Game over.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially
now I'll draw breath.
Especially if one of them's Trump, the other one can normally count their employment by the hour. Cool. Okay. Well, I think we're done talking about the hour. We've done about an hour. Look, it was just so many good segues today. God, I'm good at this. Okay.
Natural.
So yeah, thanks again, Wei, for joining us at the last minute, and thanks again, Ray, and thanks for listening, and make sure you join us for the next one.